Hi, I'm Nicholeen Peck, and this is part one of a 6-part homeschooling series called Homeschooling Made Easy, Deep, and Fun. And this video is all about how children learn. Understanding how children learn is the number one lesson that a homeschool teacher, or really any teacher, should be concerning themselves with. In fact, oftentimes when people come to me at homeschooling conferences and say, Nicholeen, what do I need to focus on as a homeschooler? What type of a curriculum do I need to use, or something like that, I will always say your number one priority is to learn how people learn. And we're going to be talking about that in this video today. And I think some of the answers to that might surprise you. I also have a free gift for you that I think is going to help you with your homeschooling. All right, so let's talk about how children learn. And quite frankly, this is how everyone learns. Super important. So here are some vital keys to learning that are important as you're beginning your homeschool journey. Now, whether you are new to homeschool or a veteran of homeschooling, this is going to be important information for you. So I have homeschooled all of my children all the way up. They're all adults now, and none of them attended the public school except for I had one person play on the soccer team at the public school, and I had another one do like the show choir, the madrigals choir, and start in some plays and stuff, and won state in all the music championships and those kinds of things, choir things. They did those things at the school, and that was it. So basically they went over there for a couple of extracurricular things, and other than that, nobody ever went to the public school. So I can talk to you about homeschooling all the way, all the grades, and tell you what makes a big difference in the home education. So first off, I want you to know that I have been studying how people learn ever since I decided I was going to homeschool. I recognized that learning how people learn was going to be super important. The very first person that I ever read was Charlotte Mason. So I don't know if you have read her 6-book series and her journey through education and teaching children certain things, but she truly was an inspired teacher. She understood how people ticked. She understood what they needed. She understood when it was important to mimic and copy, and when it was important to think it out on your own. So she was really great at setting up the environment of learning, keeping learning fun and engaging, but also taking somebody to the next level. So I read her very first, and I was so impressed. Now, keeping in mind, my dad actually was a public school teacher, university professor. I was raised in the environment of like, oh, we are going to learn in this house, and he always was making everything into good learning. But I have to say that after I started homeschooling and I started studying how people learn, I started presenting books and things to my dad, and he actually started changing the way he was teaching in high school and in the university level. He was like, whoa, that is good. I've got to use that. I've got to use that. So he and I both started on this journey of how people learn. He would share his ideas with me, people from Erickson and Holt and all different kinds of people, and I was sharing Fenelon and DeMille and Mason and different people with him. And so it became this lifetime pursuit. I'm glad I did that, because as a person who actually is known mostly for my parenting, I do a lot of teaching also for other people. And so it's, I think, made me a better teacher overall. So if you want to have a good impact on the world, learn how people learn. And I know you're starting right now with your children in your home. So you want to have a great environment. Learning is environmental. That's important to know. Of course, a person does have to choose to learn. You can't force learning into somebody. There's not like a flip-top head feature on a child where you can just jam it in. I know that at the school, they try to do kind of an assembly line approach where it's just like, okay, right now, open up, here you go. Oh, here you go, here you go. And they assume that, that they're going to get it all that way. Of course, there is also a ton of review that is built into that method at the public school when you're going to be on a conveyor belt. You hit some of the same rooms again and again, year after year. And so then if you missed it before, hopefully you're going to get it later. But the way that I was doing education, I didn't want to have to do a lot of review. I wanted to make sure that things were getting learned, and then we could just move on from there. So that's what we did. We created an environment where there wouldn't be tons of review. I didn't want the children to get bored or develop a hate of learning. I wanted them to always have a love of learning. So let's talk about this environment and some of the key components to this environment so that you can create a great love of learning in your child. So let's get into this environment, and I want you to know there is so much more that I can share with you than what is going to be in this series. And I have a special conference that I actually did when everyone started homeschooling in COVID and they weren't planning on it. And I created a new website, which you might not even be aware of. If you're following this channel for all of the parenting stuff that is here, which is why most people are here, they may not even know that I have a whole other website. It's called heartofhomeschool.net. And if you go to heartofhomeschool.net, there's actually free conferences that are there where I talk in depth about learning there as well. So you should be able to use the information here and the information there. And it's like getting a course in education, specifically home education. And there's other teachers too that are part of that course on heartofhomeschool.net. So don't forget to check that out. And I want you also to know that at the end of this video today, I am going to be giving you a copy of my book list, my recommended book list by ages. So I've made that available for everybody who's part of this series. So watch for that. Okay, let's talk about the environment of learning that needs to exist. Now, first thing that needs to be understood in the environment of learning is that learning is actually done through relationships. So if you have a good relationship with the person who you are teaching, then the learning is going to happen much more easily. So if you have good discussion with that person, then you're going to have a greater learning environment, because discussion is a key part of a great learning environment. In fact, discussion is one of the best teachers. When you're discussing something, you see what someone really did learn from reading that thing or hearing you read it or watching that video clip, whatever it was. You get to see what is really going on inside their heads when they are discussing it with you. So no need to do tons of testing if you're going to spend a lot of time doing discussion, because that's basically like an oral exam, but it's done in a super comfortable, non-confrontational sort of a way. So anyway, discussion, relationship. Your child needs to develop a relationship with each academic subject, with the writers that he or she is reading, but most importantly, the relationship with you. If you do not have a great relationship with your child, or there's a lot of tension or strain that is there, then that's going to be the number one thing that you work on. We're talking first stop. You need to be focusing on getting the communication and the relationship going well. In fact, that's why I'm invited to all of the homeschooling conferences. So people invite me to speak all over the world about homeschooling and about parenting. They say, Nicholeen, please share your homeschool things, but please also share about parenting. Because if people don't have the parenting things going right, then they won't have the homeschool things going right either. And so usually the things that I share are things that are in one of my top selling books called Parenting a House United. So be sure to check that out when you get a chance. And there's courses and trainings, 3-day trainings I do for couples to get your family self-governing. If your children can self-govern, meaning they can follow your instructions, they can get things done when they need to be done, they can learn to budget their own time. Those kinds of things are all self-governed behaviors. If they can learn how to do that, your homeschooling just got about 1,000 times easier. Those are some of the things that make things so difficult for people who are trying to have a lot of hours at home as a family. So there is no one that cannot homeschool their children if they want to, especially if they've put the effort into developing a really solid relationship. And you're at the right place, because that's what this Teaching Self-Government channel is all about. So relationship is key, and whether you like it or not, your child will develop a relationship with math, history, science, with each author that they read. So be picky on what you are choosing to present to the child. I didn't bring in textbooks until kind of later into the game, and that's because I didn't want to destroy a relationship that was just forming with math and stuff like that. When it was easy, I decided to keep it about the relationship I was having with the child because that was easier for them to use during that time. And we'll talk more about books, textbooks, when to use, what to use in a different episode of this series. So, stay tuned for that. We're going to be talking about so many great things that are going to help you with your homeschooling. Another key piece to creating a great environment for good education and good learning is a feeling or a tone of trust. So you have to trust the process. Learning will happen no matter what. That's why there's all these different movements out there, like unschooling movements and stuff like that. Now, I was not an unschooler. I definitely believed in inspiring my children to do things by presenting them with good opportunities and not requiring them to do absolutely everything. But I also did make sure that as part of the inspiration process, I read them inspirational stuff and discussed things with them. I did projects with them. We're going to discuss more about how I did that and some of the cool project-based things that I did as a homeschooler that might give you some ideas in some of the upcoming episodes as well in this series. Making sure that you trust the process is key. People are going to learn no matter what. It's just, what are they going to learn? What are they going to process? And how are you going to facilitate the type of processing or learning that you're looking for? That's super important. So there shouldn't be stress. Trust is the opposite of force. So if you feel like you're forcing the learning down their throats all the time, especially when they're little, guess what? The learning is not going to happen. So you do have to make sure that it feels comfortable. It feels easy, free flowing, like this is just the way our life is. This means you don't want to be too overscheduled. If you're overscheduled and always running from thing to thing, co-op to class to this to that, then guess what will happen? You will start just jamming it down their throat just like they did over at the public school. And you're wanting something different. You're wanting a different relationship that doesn't require lots of review, lots of stress or anxiety. And so you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time to just ease into all of that learning and just to use that learning process the way that it was meant to be in the format and the speed that their brain can pick it up. That's the beautiful thing about homeschool, is we can go at their brain's speed, which means they don't have to feel ahead or behind. No competition, just learn. Just gather and get excited about all of this stuff. So trust is super important, and everything you do in the day, whether you're doing dishes together or whether you're doing geometry, will be a learning experience for them. In fact, learning those adult skills is pretty important for living an adult life. Speaking of adult skills are vital components to learning. The more that your child works with you and learns adult skills like how to cook, how to clean, how to garden, how to sew, how to fix and repair, all these kinds of things will hook all of their learning together. Most people have to have an element of hands-on to learn. Well, when you are a homeschooler, you can bring in all the hands-on you want. And I suggest starting by bringing the children along with you and working with you as you go throughout your day. Teach them to do laundry, teach them to clean the bathrooms, teach them to chop the food with you. My children were using knives very proficiently by the time they were 6 years old. When they were 3 years old, they could fold their laundry and put it away, and they would help me with daily household chores. They could tend each other, and do little games and read to each other. By the time my children were 8 years old, they could do some of the canning, the family canning, because we have a farm and we preserve food and stuff like that. They could do that all by themselves because I didn't stop them from growing up. I didn't baby them or make everything all fluffy and fun. I made their lives so that they were becoming adults. I wanted them to see themselves building confidence, learning life skills. So work, 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 family work, plus their own personal daily chores, plus working alongside you in other ways. So keep the work happening happening, and this is going to be a great jump off point for all of the other mediums of education that you're bringing in, all of the books and stories. They'll be able to relate more to those things, and they'll see them as more relevant in their lives. So let's talk about stories and identity. You know, those things actually kind of go hand in hand. So stories are important. Stories are actually the very best teacher. If I were to tell you right now about how I was reading scripture with my son when he was 7 years old, and we read in the book of Isaiah about how there would come a time when good things would be called bad and bad things would be called good, and how he went to his friend's house that afternoon and he heard a song that was a children's song that had been made up to a bad piece of music, and he came home and said, "Mom, I can't be there because there's a song there where good is bad and bad is good, and we just read about that and that is a problem," then you would remember that story. See, stories teach a whole lot. So when you tell your child a story and they can learn from that story, all the better. Find stories that integrate math. Find stories that integrate personal development and social skills, stories that integrate what you want to be as a family, stories that are about science, stories that are about history. The best way to learn history, the subject so many people say they don't like, is actually through stories. If you learn the stories of history, you never have to memorize the dates. You just know when things happened and how it occurred, and that is enough, because that's what history is. It's knowing the stories. So you want to have these wonderful stories where you can discuss them. They hit the heart of the person, which means you're probably going to find yourself not in textbooks a lot. You're going to be talking about classics. And I'm going to be sharing with you how to pick a good book and how to make sure that you find that book that will teach the thing that you really want to be teaching. And don't forget, I'm going to be giving you my free book list too in this video. So we'll get to that in just a few minutes. Another vital component to your environment being good for them learning is you, not them. You need to be the example of learning. You need to get your own education. This is going to help you know, wait, how am I learning right now? You will be able to evaluate yourself and use that evaluation as proof for what you're going to be doing for the children. That's what I did. Sure, I was matriculated, I went to college and all that kind of stuff, but I never really got a really world-class education until I started homeschooling my children. Then everything changed, and I started watching what I was doing in my own educational journey as I was applying the principles that I would be using with them, with myself. And then what happened is I became a better teacher. So you must be learning to show them you never stop learning. Everyone keeps learning, but also so that you can do your own research of what learning actually feels like. I am convinced that that's what made Charlotte Mason so great at understanding learning. And also Fenelon and Oliver DeMille. These are three great people who have taught how people learn. I mean, anyone, you read Adler's How to Read a Book, it's because he evaluated how he learned to read books, and that created this pattern that he could teach to other people. So I want to talk about one other author right now before we end this segment, which is Oliver DeMille. He wrote a series of books about education. This is basically his synthesis of ideas that he learned from other people like Mason and everybody else. He put them together in a beautiful educational formula for how people learn. His book is called A Thomas Jefferson Education. It is not a curriculum. Warning, it is not a curriculum. It is a philosophy of education book. It is basically a book on how people learn. It is a formula that you can follow, but you still might have to decide on a math curriculum at some point, okay? So it is going to give you key principles. He also wrote another book called The Phases of Learning, which is fantastic. That book was built upon the Thomas Jefferson Education book. There's another book called The Thomas Jefferson Companion, and a book about teens and those teen years called TJ Ed for Teens. All of those books would be great books to help beef up your understanding of how people learn. But I want to just share a key thing that he talks about in the book of Thomas Jefferson Education, because I think it's vital to you understanding truly how people learn. So in his book of Thomas Jefferson Education, DeMille talks about the phases of learning. It is vital to understand the phases of learning for a person to actually see learning happen, okay? So instead of just seeing a few aha moments here and there, you can witness learning happening if you understand those phases of learning. So phase number 1, he says, takes place at ages 0 to 8. And then he always says, give or take 100 years. So ages 0 to 8, a person is in what he calls core phase. This is what they learn, their core values, their morals, their foundational things that they want to build on. They learn what's right and wrong, good and bad, true and false, and they learn who they are. They start developing a very secure identity by bonding with family, reading genealogical stories of their ancestors. They work and play with their parents and siblings. This helps them learn about life, who they are, and all of the basic fundamentals of science and things that you just start learning as you go through life in general. So this is the core phase, ages 0 to 8. And by the way, work is like work, like, dishes, gardening, feeding the pigs, stuff like that. I know not everyone has pigs, but that's work, okay? And then play is reading, art, playing with numbers, all of that is play, as well as playing with friends, brothers and sisters, and you. So all those things are core phase. So then the next phase, ages about 8 to 12, give or take 100 years, is what he called love of learning phase. So love of learning phase is when a person learns to love learning. They flit from thing to thing, like a bee jumping from flower to flower. Ooh, I want to learn about swords. Ooh, I want to learn how to make a pie. Oh, I want to learn how to grow a garden. Oh, I want to learn how to read this book. It's harder. It's a chapter book. So they jump from thing to thing, and during this stage, that is when they really get into chapter books. They start beefing up their reading. They start learning some of their basic scholar skills that they are going to need for success, which is huge. That's a love of learning, and the whole point is that they learn to love learning more and more and more and more. So then the next phase, which is ages about 12 to 18, give or take 100 years, is the scholar phase. So this is when things start to get tight, harder. They start to really work harder. Now, a lot of times people stop learning in their scholar years, and they've put the pressure on when they were teeny tiny. But actually, DeMille says, no, the pressure needs to go on when they're older. Not necessarily to age 12, because they do have this transition period. But by the time a child gets to about 14, if they've been through the other phases of learning, mind you, you don't just expect this of them if they haven't been through the full phases. But if they have a love of learning, and they are used to learning all on their own a lot, and having a mentor help them along the way, then what happens is that at this phase they start saying, I need it to be harder. I need to be challenged more. I'm going to set bigger goals for myself. I am going to get a mentor who will tell me harder books to read. I am now going to take this college class maybe. Like, they just start doing more things. And this is when they might really get into classes in a co-op or something that you're part of. So this is ages 12 to 18. During this time, they might be studying anywhere from 6 to 12 hours a day, which is a lot of study time that they're putting in. After these phases of learning come some other phases of learning that probably won't happen in your home to anyone but you do need to know what they are, and those are the depth phase. So this is where you go deep into a certain topic, such as how people learn, or maybe parenting, or something that you care about, okay? Maybe a business pursuit. So you go in deep. This is usually college for a lot of people. Then comes mission phase, where you are living your mission. You are starting to become the person that you were supposed to be. You're making alliances with people. You're starting to turn out products. Maybe it's like books and stuff like that. Then comes impact phase. This is when you're now teaching somebody else to be the person that you have become. So you're starting to prepare others to live the life that you have lived. This whole video right now is me having impact phase, me trying to teach you how to do everything I've already learned so that you don't have to figure it all out yourself, so that you can be the very best homeschooler that you can be. That's what this whole series is dedicated to. I'm so excited to share all of the other content that I have in the other videos upcoming. In the next video, we're going to be talking about, do we use curriculum? Do we not use curriculum? What do we use instead? So be sure to join us tomorrow for that next episode in this 6-part series. And don't forget to click the link below this video to go to my free book list. I would love for you to have a really good book list. People hand out book lists all the time. And you know what I've noticed? A ton of things are just popular books, popular fiction, what Charlotte Mason would call twaddle, but not life-changing stuff. And I'm all about life-changing stuff. We'll talk more about that next time. But for now, get the book list, get ready, and join me again for the next episode.